Hello my loves, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts and welcome back. So 3 glorious years ago, I fell down the crochet sweater rabbit hole and I have zero intention of crawling out. There is just something so satisfying about crocheting a sweater for yourself. You slip it on, it's hugging all of your curves, you're feeling amazing. Girl, don't get me started. There's a million reasons why you need to be crocheting yourself more sweaters, but I digress. Now each of my sweaters is a little bit different, but they all do have one feature that you can find in every single one of them, and that is some kind of crochet ribbing. You know what I mean, crochet ribbing. This here that I have on my collar, I have it on my cuffs, I have it on the hem of my sweaters. It's that nice finishing detail that really pulls the final garment together. And now that I have a small boutique of handmade crochet sweaters, you could say I've learned a thing or two about crochet ribbing over the years. So today I am spilling the tea on my top 3 favorite crochet ribbing techniques. We're gonna go from, okay, that's fine, to yeah, now we're talking, and we're gonna finish with absolute perfection. If you're anything like me and you obsess over those finishing details, you're gonna wanna pay really close attention to this video. And while you're here, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but you have no idea how much it means to me and everything I'm trying to accomplish here at TL Yarn Crafts. Thank you so much to everyone who's already subscribed and welcome to my new subs. Now, before we can start talking ribbing, of course we have to give some love to our Cup of Caffeine sponsor, and it's getting a little bit late in the day, so I have switched to that high quality H2O.
And that's what I call high quality H2O. Oh!
And today's Cup of Caffeine sponsor is Sue Robbins, and when donating, Sue said, I am a beginner staring at retirement, taking a class to get going, and the instructor recommended you. I can see why, as your personality and delivery method are engaging, which is what I look for in YouTube channels. Who wants boring help? Now I need to practice more. Thank you so much, Sue, and I hope you and I have a long relationship together as you start falling in love with crochet just like I did. Now, if you like my channel and want to support what I'm doing here, buy me a coffee. Who knows, I might shout you out in the next one. Now, let's talk crochet ribbing. The first ribbing technique we're going to explore is post-stitch ribbing. Let's do it. We're going to start off with a good old slip knot. Just make that however you like. And then we are going to chain any odd number of chains. And if you're curious, I'm using a Lion Brand Lazy Days and a 5.5mm crochet hook throughout these tutorials. And once we've got all of our chains, locate that second chain from your hook, and we're going to place a double crochet in that chain. Now, I prefer to work in the back bumps of my chains to complete those stitches, but you can work in the front however you like. So we're going to yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Just a regular old US double crochet. And we're going to complete those all the way down the chain. Next, we'll chain 1 and turn our work. And this is the wrong side of our work, and we're going to work single crochets across this entire row. Insert, yarn over, pull up the loop, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way down. So 1 single crochet for each double crochet from the previous row. Now here's where things get interesting. Chain 1 and turn your work, and we're going to place a double crochet in this first stitch here. Next, we need to do a front post double crochet around the next double crochet. So this one corresponds to the stitch that's already worked, so we're going to work around this one here. So yarn over and complete the double crochet around the post of that next stitch. And we're going to follow that with a double crochet in the following stitch. So that's front post 1, followed by double crochet in the next stitch. So 1 front post, followed by a double crochet. And we're going to repeat that down the line, placing a double crochet in our last stitch. Our wrong side rows are super simple. Chain 1, turn, and we're just gonna single crochet in each stitch across. So make sure you're working under both loops of those stitches and just single crochet across on our wrong side. And then we'll flip back to the front. Chain 1, turn your work, and now we'll jump right back into our post stitch pattern, double in the first stitch, and now we're going to put our post stitch around the post from the previous row. So that's a front post double crochet around the post from the previous row, double in the next stitch. Double around the post right here. And double in the next stitch. And we'll repeat that across the line, working a double crochet in our last stitch. Now that you know how to do post stitch ribbing, there are a few pros and cons that you want to keep in mind if you plan to put this in your project. One of the biggest pros, of course, is that this is great for beginners. We're just using basic stitches. With the texture of this ribbing, you can really see exactly where your hook is supposed to go, which makes it very easy for those beginner projects. Some other pros about this ribbing technique: it's very flexible, it's got really nice texture, and it is quite stretchy. One of the biggest cons of this technique, which I'm sure you saw, is that it is quite curly. So if you're putting this on the bottom of the hem of a sweater or even on the cuffs of a cardigan, it's going to curl a bit from the bottom, so steam or wet blocking is absolutely necessary. Some other cons about this ribbing technique is that it is quite bulky and it does use significantly more yarn than the other two ribbing techniques I'm going to show you today. But I will say, if you do want to try this out, I would recommend it for something where the ribbing is not necessarily functional, right? It's not trying to compress or hold anything in. So the borders on blankets and even some of your more comfortable hats would be a great application for this ribbing technique. Let's move on to the next one, which is single crochet through the back loop. We're going to bring that good old slip knot back, so make that however you like. Insert your hook, tighten down, and then we're going to start with a chain of any amount that you desire. Now this chain is going to dictate the width of your ribbing, so just keep that in mind as you're making your chains. Once your chains are complete, you're going to find that second chain from the hook, and again, I'm going to work in the back bump of that chain and place a single crochet. And I'm going to do single crochets in each chain all the way down the line. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook, all the way down. To start the next row, chain 1 and turn your work. Now we need to identify the back loop of our next chain. So this is the front loop, this is the back loop. We're working in the back loop only. So we're going to place a single crochet in the back loop of this stitch. So insert into the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and complete your single crochet. And we're going to do single crochets in the back loop all the way down the line. And that really is it for this ribbing. Chain 1, turn, single crochet through the back loop all the way down. So let's complete this row and we'll start another row together. Again, single crochet through the back loop all the way down the line. After this last single crochet, chain 1, turn your work, and this is what it should look like so far. Identify the front and back loops and work just in that back loop, placing single crochets all the way down the line. Just single crochet through the back loop to create this really lovely ribbed look. This is one of my all-time favorite ribbing techniques. I've used it for tons of projects, everything from hats to mittens to sweaters. I love this one, particularly for several of its pros, including the nice, clean, uniform look. It looks the same on the front and the back. It's completely reversible, so you don't have to worry about having a right side and a wrong side to this kind of ribbing. It also uses very simple stitches, so another one that's good for beginners, and it goes by relatively quickly once you get into a groove. Now, there are some cons to this ribbing technique. technique, one of which being is that it's not a very sturdy ribbing. It has a tendency to stretch out and it doesn't necessarily bounce back like you might expect ribbing to do. That means tension is going to be incredibly important, so I recommend keeping even tension as you work these stitches, and consider maybe going down a half to a full millimeter size when working on this ribbing compared to what you're working in the body of your project. Like I said, I have used this ribbing technique for everything under the sun and have had no problems with it, but like most things in crochet, it all comes down to personal preference, so you pick the ribbing technique that works best for you. Okay, we've got 2 down, 1 more to go. Now let's talk about slip stitch ribbing. What do you know? Another swatch, another slip knot. So make that however you like it. Insert your hook, tighten down that knot, and we're gonna make a series of chains to whatever number you want them to be. Like the previous ribbing, this chain is going to dictate how wide your ribbing is. And since this is slip stitch ribbing, you're gonna wanna make your chain a little bit longer because the stitches are much smaller. Once you have the number of chains that you want, I'm going to flip to the back bump and slip stitch into that back bump. So insert, yarn over, and pull through both loops on the hook. I'm going to do that all the way down the line. It's going to be very important that you don't pull these slip stitches too tight throughout this swatch because we will need to work into each slip stitch we make. So just slip stitch all the way down the line. To start the next row, we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and we're going to work in yarn over slip stitches, so yarn over your hook to start. For this first stitch, we're going to work in both loops of that slip stitch, so working through both the front and the back loop. So insert your hook under both of those loops, yarn over your hook, pull up the loop, and then pull through the remaining 2 loops that are on the hook. You might have to do that in a couple movements. Now for the next stitch, we're going to work just in the back loop. So that's the front loop, here's the back loop, and we're going to work in yarn over slip stitch through the back loop until our last stitch. So yarn over, insert into the back loop, yarn over, and pull through all the loops on the hook. Take your time mastering this. I know when I first tried it, it was a little tricky. So just go nice and slow until you can hit a rhythm. Yarn over, insert into the back loop, yarn over, pull up the loop, and through the rest of the loops on the hook. All the way down the line until you get to the very last stitch. Now once you do reach that last stitch, we want to work in the front and back loop just like we did for our first stitch. So make sure you yarn over, grab both of those loops, and complete your yarn over slip stitch. By working through both loops on the beginning and edge stitch, you just get nice clean edges on this slip stitch ribbing. It's looking pretty okay so far, but this one definitely benefits by adding a bit more fabric. Now what I'm going to do here is add a stitch marker to the wrong side of my work just to remind myself where my yarn over slip stitches go. To start the next row, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work. For this first stitch, again, I'm going to work through both loops of the stitch for a slip stitch. So inserting under both loops, yarn over, and complete the slip stitch. And now I'm going to work in slip stitch just through the back loop for the rest of the row until I get to that last stitch. So insert, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook to complete regular old slip stitches just through the back loop until we get to our last stitch. We made it to our last stitch. Just make sure you work that slip stitch under both loops of that stitch. Lovely, lovely. Now we'll chain 1, turn, and I'm on the back of my work, so I'm going to do yarn over slip stitches, working through both loops of that first stitch. There we go. And then just through the back loop of each stitch until we get to our last stitch. You can see that no matter how good of a rhythm I get into, sometimes there are a few little fits and starts, but it is totally worth the effort. Continue to repeat these 2 rows for the rest of your ribbing. Ugh, slip stitch ribbing. I could go on and on and on about how much I love this technique, and there are several pros that stand out right from the jump. The first one being that absolutely gorgeous, sleek, professional look. This is one of the most knit look stitches that you can achieve in crochet, and it's just from some lovely slip stitches. Other than the gorgeous polished look, it is also amazingly stretchy, and it is reversible. While it doesn't look the same on both sides would be appropriate to have on the front of your work. For all of its pros, slip stitch ribbing does have some cons. The main one being is that it takes forever. It takes such a long time to complete this ribbing because of the way that slip stitches are constructed. And that yarn over slip stitch, if you don't have the right tension, you're going to be ripping that thing out and doing that stitch over and over again. So I strongly recommend practicing this on a small swatch before you get into your project, especially if you're using really nice yarn. Another big con for me with this ribbing is that you do have to pay really close attention to whether you're working the right side or the wrong side of your ribbing. Since you have a 2-row repeat, I like to put that stitch marker on there to remind me that I'm actually supposed to do yarn over slip stitches, because there's been more than one occasion where I've just tried to slip stitch the whole thing. So you do have to pay attention, but again, once you get down into a groove, it's probably no big deal. Using slip stitch ribbing techniques is a surefire way to add some gorgeous polish to your pieces, and there are a dozen different ways to put slip stitches into ribbing, so I encourage you to explore those, look for those, Google those, and use the one that you like the best. This one happens to be mine, but if you have a different one, I'd love to hear about it. And there you have it, gorgeous. 3 marvelous ways to add ribbing to your crochet pieces. Now, these techniques are interchangeable, so don't feel like you are stuck using what is recommended in a pattern. If you prefer slip stitch ribbing and the pattern calls for post stitch ribbing, switch it up, honey. It is your project, so you make the rules. And speaking of patterns, now that you know all these different ribbing techniques, how about I share a little inspo for your next project to show off some of those ribbing techniques. I've got 3 really fun TL Yarn Crafts patterns that are completely free that would look amazing on your crochet hooks. The first one being the Kima Cardi. It is freezing here in Michigan, and all I can think about is cozying up with a deliciously oversized cardigan, and the Kima Cardi fits the bill. Now, this one uses bulky weight yarn in a very simple textured stitch, and it's offset by all of this gorgeous ribbing. You're going to find ribbing on the collar, on the cuffs, on the hem of the sweater, as well as on the pockets. So you get ample opportunity to practice your favorite ribbing technique. Now, if you need a slightly quicker project, might I recommend the Metro hat. Now, I am slightly obsessed with this piece that I designed in collaboration with Hobie for our yarn Apricity that came out last year. So the hat starts with this lovely band of ribbing, and this was one of the first times that I'd used the slip stitch ribbing in a TL Yarn Crafts pattern, and I couldn't imagine it going better. The stretchiness of the ribbing keeps this hat snug on your head, which you absolutely need when you're walking around in these Michigan winters. And you've got so many colors to pick from in the Apricity collection that you can make one for you and everybody else in your family. Last is going to be an oldie but goodie from TL Yarn Crafts, and that is the Sweater Weather Cardigan. So this is kind of your everyday slip-on after the shower kind of cardigan, and it hits you mid-calf. Very snugly for working from home. Now, the silhouette on this cardigan is dramatic enough, but it's all the ribbing details that take it to the next level. So pick your favorite ribbing, tuck into an audiobook. You're gonna be here a while, but it'll be so worth it in the end. But that is more than enough of my opinions, because now it's time for me to hear yours. And I would love to know, which of these ribbing techniques are your favorites? Is there a certain ribbing that you use all the time? Is there any ribbings that I talked about that you never heard of before? And I want to know, which ribbing do you plan to use on your next project? The comments are open, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Honestly, reading your comments is a highlight of my day. I make a fresh pot of coffee. I go through and activity type all my replies. I just absolutely love it. So sound off, please. Now, as for me, I am actually working on the ribbing for a cardigan that I'm gifting to my mother, and I am only halfway through the bottom hem, so I still have a long way to go. So I'm going to bid you farewell. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time. Bye. How many stocks do I really have in stock? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 5. Hey, devil is a lie. He's a sissy non-god.